Hello, today I want to show you how to diagnose your GE Ultrafast washer-dryer combo if it's having a water-related issue. This video could help if you're getting a warning on the interface asking you to confirm if the H2O supply is on, meaning that it says or thinks that the unit is not getting water. And let's first try some super easy things to begin with before we get into some harder things. First, make sure that your water supply is actually on. Is it possible that someone may have accidentally turned it off? Next, another thing to check is to turn the supply off. Unscrew the hoses from the rear of the washing machine and test the water supply into a bucket, and make sure that you're getting good flow into the bucket, both hot and cold water, as the machine may not run properly if only one side is working. Next, check the water valve filters. You can remove these little filters with needle nose pliers. Are they clogged or obstructed at all? If they are, you can wash them in water and then reinstall the screens to see if that fixed your problem. Next, you could check the machine for error codes that would involve the water valve or other issues to help you locate the source of the trouble. I'm going to have a link on how to check the diagnostic codes in the description, and it should be at the end of the video. I would look for anything mentioning the water valves, pressure sensor system, or the control board itself, and this list could vary, and that video will have a more extensive list of what could be going wrong. That same video will show you how to test the water valves as well in a later segment. You can force them to turn on or not. If they cannot turn on, the valves could be bad. If they can be forced on, but you are not getting anything in the machine to run it, it's possible that the board or another component is bad. The valve test there may be able to help you diagnose the system as well and go a little bit further. In most cases, though, if you've gotten this far, chances are it could be that the water valves have gone bad, and I want to show you how to access the water valves for additional tests and then replacement. To access the water valves or anything else inside, you're generally going to need the following things: a Phillips head screwdriver, a pair of pliers, and then some sort of organizer. To diagnose the valves, you'll also need a multimeter as well. Now let's go ahead and open up the machine. First, make sure that the washing machine is not on and unplug it from the wall. To begin, we need to remove the detergent and fabric softener dispensers from the machine. To remove the dispensers, pull them each individually all the way out as far as they're going to go until you can't anymore. Then press the tab down at the rear of each of these dispensers and pull them out. Next, once the dispensers are out, locate the following 5 screw holes. Each one is pretty deep inside, and you need to use a Phillips head screwdriver to remove each of these screws. On this particular unit that I'm dealing with today, removing the top 4 screws was pretty easy using a drill gun and a magnetic bit, which made it quite a bit easier due to the recessed nature of these holes. But on the last screw in the lower left corner, I had to use a screwdriver with a much thicker point, as it seems that it may require a thicker Phillips head drill bit, which kind of threw me off. Next, with all the screws out, go ahead and pull the filter out as far as it will go, then press the tab on the left side of the filter as shown, and then pull the entire filter housing assembly out. With that done, you can now take the console and pull forward on the front left side of the washer where the dispensers were, then pull up on it, and the assembly should fully detach from the front of the washing machine. Now, when you pull the console forward, note that there's going to be a huge cluster of wires hiding behind the interface panel. Make sure to have a glove or ESD bracelet on when you start to remove any of the wire harnesses. Now, from your point of view, these are the wires that you're going to see on the panel. Depending on what you want to do, the wires you need to remove may vary. To remove the interface from the rest of the machine, these are the 4 wires in black that are highlighted that you need to remove, and then depending on the situation, you may want to remove the one in red, but usually I suggest against it in most cases. Make sure to be very delicate with the wires as you remove them. Also note the push mount wire ties on the interface. Depending on your needs, you're probably going to have to use a wire cutter to remove some or most of these that are either inside the console itself or on the washing machine heat shield as well. Just be very careful not to damage these wires. When you use the wire cutters, remove only the plastic cable ties themselves. Here's another point of view on where most of the cable ties are that you may have to look at removing, depending on what you're going to do. Next, separate the harness from the door light system here by pressing in the clip and then removing it. Then on the right side of the metal heat shield, you're going to find this hole with a wire that's going into it that should be blue and black. This is the blower thermistor. It's absolutely critical that you don't try to pull this out with your fingers, by the wires or the harness itself, as you may break and destroy the harness in the attempt to do that. Instead, you want to take a pair of needle nose pliers, insert them into the thermistor housing, clamp down on the sides of the thermistor, and then remove it from the rubber housing that it's located in. When you have all the wires properly removed, you should be able to remove the entire console now fully from the machine. Now you want to remove the 7 screws that hold the blue metal top to the gray metal heat shield just behind it. 2 of these screws are on the left side, 3 are on the top, and then 2 are on the right side. Note that one of the screws on the right side is an interface retaining screw, which looks much different than the other ones, and note its position on the washing machine when you have to reinstall it. Next, pull the cover forward, then up to remove it. Depending on the situation, you may have to lift from the sides first. This will expose the dispenser, main control board, and blower inverter motor assembly, as well as the heat shield assembly on the very front. At the rear of the unit, in the right corner, you're going to have the whole water valve system. You can now test these valves with a multimeter to see if they are bad electronically. Set your multimeter to ohms resistance, then tap the connectors onto the top of the wire harnesses. When the leads are pressed to the metal connectors on the harnesses, you should get between 1,000 and 1,100 ohms of resistance on each of the 5 connectors. If you see a value much different than that, you will need to replace them, and just for reference, all of these valves should test identically to one another, so again, if one is significantly off, that coil is probably bad. Know that you can remove the harnesses and test the multimeter onto the valve. Now, if you get an OL reading or the numbers are significantly off, you're going to have to replace them. And to replace them, you're going to begin by removing the harnesses from each of the 5 connectors, as well as the push mount cable tie on the left side of the screen where the heat pump system is. There are 5 harnesses on the water valves that you'll need to remove. Now, go ahead and remove the 4 screws holding the valve assembly in. There are 2 on the hot side, then there are 2 on the cold side, and you're going to have to remove all 4 screws to remove the valve assembly. You should be able then to remove the valve assembly out of the unit. Next, note the hose orientation on the hose connectors. You'll need to remove them from the valve assembly to fully remove the water valve from the washing machine, and due to the filming conditions, I wasn't able to actually film the hose removal from these valves, and I do apologize. But I've removed a lot of other hoses from this machine, and you're simply going to take a pair of pliers, press in on the hose clamp, and then move the clamp away from the barb on the water valve. If you have any issues removing the hoses, use a screwdriver to help remove the black rubber hoses from the valve assembly. You'll press in and then just kind of pry it away. Note that the valves are only sold as one complete unit, even though it looks like they're separate, and if you need to buy them, I will have a link in the description for the valves. When you have the new valves and hoses routed properly and reinstalled, you can just press the threaded segment of the valves back into the housing and push them into place. I did notice that this was a little bit difficult because the threading wanted to catch on the chassis of the washing machine, but with a little bit of wiggling, they should press right in. Once you have the valves in place, go ahead and take your screwdriver and reinsert the 4 screws, 2 on the hot side, 2 on the cold side, and make sure the wire harnesses are in place. Once that's done, reattach the wire harnesses and the push mount connector back into place. Now, I didn't film it, but if the valve replacement didn't solve the issue, it's possible that there's a board or pressure switch issue. This is a very new machine, and we haven't really done a lot of testing on this, but if one of those situations was the case, you may need to go into the main board and test C&D 12 for voltage, but due to how advanced that is, I'm not going to do that in this particular video. So let's go back to the rest of the machine and how to reinstall and put it back together. With the heat shield on, the top of the entire washing machine assembly can go back on. Make sure to seat it around the edges so that it sits on the 4 plastic pegs that are around the edges of the washer chassis. Once you have those pegs slotted into place with the top, pull the unit backwards and it should become flush with the machine like you see here. The entire top of this assembly should be totally flush, and as you can see here, the lines are perfect, and if it's off center and there's any gaps, you may want to reseat the top of the unit. Next, insert the 7 screws that go around the top of the unit into place as you see here. 2 on the left side, 3 up top, and 2 on the right. Note the super wide screw that gets installed on the right side of the assembly. This is very important that you install it because of the interface that we're going to put on soon. With the top installed, it's time to go ahead and reinsert all the wires into the interface to get the last pieces of the machine reinstalled. If you have gloves, make sure to use them. You should have approximately 4 wire harnesses to install here. The NTC wire, the dispenser wire, the door light wire, and then the main control power wire. And you do have to route a lot of these through the zip ties or push mount ties depending on what you've chosen when you installed the heat shield. Here's the pictures of the wires that I had to reinstall into the interface and how they go. I just wanted to take some pictures when I was reinstalling this to use them as a guiding principle when I put the interface back together. Finally, depending on what you did with the blower thermistor, you may have to reinsert the entire assembly or just the wire into place depending on if you took the whole unit out, and I did take the entire assembly out. This is how I have my system routed with the lack of the push mount cable ties, as again I had to buy a bunch after this video was done to try to find the right ones that would actually fit. Finally, roll the panel up into the heat shield and lock it into place. Mine's set and locked into place very easily, but the key here to get it installed is that the interface needs to thread onto the two large wide screws on the right side, and the interface should lock into place. You may have to push it in and then pull it to the left side to get it to snap into place, or even use an angle depending on the situation, but I was able to just press it in as you see. The last screws then to install on this machine before we have it back together are the 5 screws here in the interface. Note that the one screw on the machine was different in the lower left corner as it had a finer thread count. Also note that the dispenser likes to push rearward when you install these 5 screws. I had to make sure I kept pulling the dispenser forward into the interface to make sure that the screws reinstalled properly. Once you have all 5 screws into the dispenser and interface securely, you just have to insert the dispensers into place. Know that the bottom smaller dispenser has a groove at the bottom of the housing that needs matched up for it to insert properly into the housing. I hope this video helped you resolve the issue with your water. If not, I'm going to have more videos on this machine in the future related to this problem, such as the pressure switch and other things that involve in-depth repairs. I hope you have a great day.